You think they stopped caring about you, but what if the truth is completely different? What if the silence you are seeing is not a sign that they have moved on, but a way of protecting themselves from feelings they do not know how to handle? The distance, the cold behavior, the lack of communication, it may look like rejection from the outside. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, disappearing is often not about forgetting someone. It is about struggling with how much they actually feel. Here is what most people never explain. Sometimes, the more distant they become, the more intense the battle inside their mind becomes. They may check your profile when they think nobody knows. They may type messages and delete them before sending. They may imagine conversations with you over and over again, creating entire scenarios in their head, and then emotionally react to things that never even happened. Those confusing actions are not always random. The mixed signals, the sudden changes, the emotional push and pull, they can reveal more than their words ever will. Their behavior becomes a hidden language, showing what they are afraid to admit. By the end of this video, you will understand how to recognize these patterns before they happen. You will understand what their silence may actually mean, why they suddenly become warm after creating distance, and why the person who appears the least affected can sometimes be the person fighting the strongest emotional battle internally. But before we go deeper, I want you to do something. If you have ever experienced someone making you feel wanted one moment and then pushing you away the next, write "I see you" in the comments. Just those 3 words. That lets me know who truly understands this experience, and those are the people I want to speak to throughout this video. Now let's get into it. The first mind game is the sudden disappearance after an emotionally powerful moment. Think about it. You just had an amazing conversation. Everything felt natural. They were present. They looked at you differently. Maybe for that moment, you felt like you were the only person who mattered. You went to sleep feeling hopeful because something about the connection felt different. Then the next day arrives, and everything changes. No message, no call, no explanation, just silence. And that silence becomes so overwhelming that you start questioning yourself. You begin wondering if you misunderstood the connection. You wonder if you imagined the closeness. You ask yourself what you did wrong. But that is exactly where the confusion begins. You did not imagine it. Avoidant people often create the most distance after the moments that feel the most meaningful because emotional closeness becomes frightening when it starts feeling real. Small moments of connection may feel safe, but when emotions become deeper and harder to control, their defense mechanisms can activate. When they realize they are becoming attached, when they notice someone is starting to matter, their instinct may be to create space, not because you were overwhelming, but because the connection became powerful enough to challenge the emotional walls they have built. While you are sitting there wondering why they disappeared, they may be somewhere else questioning why they are thinking about you so much. They may be trying to convince themselves that they do not care while their actions reveal the opposite. That silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes silence is an internal struggle, and people only struggle this deeply when something actually matters. The second mind game is the slow withdrawal that suddenly turns into a return. You notice it happening slowly. Their messages become shorter. Their energy changes. They stop putting in the same effort. Days pass, maybe even weeks, and you start accepting that things are ending. You tell yourself you need to move forward. You tell your friends that you are done waiting. You start trying to detach emotionally. Then, suddenly, they appear again. A simple message, a random joke, a memory they bring up. A casual, thinking about you. And just like that, all those emotions you were trying to control come rushing back. This is not always accidental. Avoidant people can often sense when someone is emotionally stepping back. The moment they feel your attention shifting away, something inside them can become uncomfortable. The idea of losing someone from a distance may feel manageable, but actually losing that person can create a completely different reaction. So they reach out, not always because they are ready to fully commit. Not always because they have solved their fears. Sometimes they simply want reassurance that the connection is still there. They want to know the door is not completely closed. The confusing part is that they may not even consciously understand why they are doing it. They may believe they are simply following a feeling or an urge to check on you. But beneath that urge can be a deeper fear of losing someone who became important. The third mind game is the deep emotional conversation that seems to lead nowhere. This is one of the most confusing experiences with an avoidant person. One day they open up in a way you never expected. They share personal memories, they talk about their fears, they reveal parts of themselves they usually hide from everyone else. And in that moment, you feel like something has finally changed. You think, this is the breakthrough. They finally trust me. You feel closer than ever before. Then a few days later, everything changes again. They become distant. They act differently. They seem disconnected, almost as if that vulnerable conversation never happened. This can leave you feeling completely confused. But for someone with avoidant patterns, vulnerability can feel less like comfort and more like exposure. Opening their heart means allowing someone to see the parts of themselves they usually keep protected. And after that moment of openness, fear can take over. They do not necessarily pull away because they regret sharing with you. They pull away because they cannot believe they allowed themselves to be seen, especially by someone who has started to matter. The person they did not want to need becomes the person they cannot stop thinking about. Every time they retreat after showing vulnerability, their actions may be revealing something they cannot express directly. You reached a place inside them that most people never reach. And that is exactly what makes the connection feel dangerous to them. The fourth mind game is the jealousy test. They usually will not admit they are doing this. Suddenly they start mentioning another person. Maybe it is a coworker, maybe it is an old friend, maybe they casually bring up someone who recently contacted them. They say it like it is nothing, but then they watch your reaction carefully. They notice your expression, they notice your tone, they notice whether you seem affected, because your reaction gives them information they are afraid to ask for directly. If they see even a small sign that you care, something inside them feels reassured. They got their answer without having to ask the question, and that reveals something important about avoidant behavior. Sometimes the person who acts like they need nothing from you is secretly searching for proof that they still matter to you. Avoidant people usually do not seek reassurance in the same direct way that others might. For them, asking for confirmation can feel too vulnerable because it requires admitting that they need something from you. Instead of saying, "Do I still matter to you?" they often look for answers in indirect ways. They create small situations to measure their importance in your life. They want to know if they still have an emotional place in your mind without having to openly admit that they want that reassurance. And here is the interesting part. The more strongly they feel connected to you, the more likely they may be to test that connection. Because the more valuable you become to them, the more frightening it becomes to imagine that they may not hold the same value in your world. So they create little reactions. They mention someone else. They become slightly distant. They watch what happens next. Every test is saying something they are afraid to say directly. They are not always trying to make you jealous. Sometimes they are trying to discover whether you still care. Before we continue, remember this. If any of these patterns feel familiar, it does not mean you are imagining things. It does not mean you are being overly emotional or looking too deeply into every action. Sometimes clarity comes when you finally understand the pattern that has been happening in front of you all along. And that kind of understanding can completely change the way you see the connection. The fifth mind game is the hot and cold cycle that feels unpredictable but actually follows a pattern. One moment, they are affectionate and emotionally available. They make you feel close to them. They text you often. They seem completely invested. Then suddenly, everything changes. Their energy becomes different. Their replies become shorter. They create distance. They feel like a completely different person. And you start analyzing everything. You wonder what you said. You wonder what you did. You try to figure out what caused the shift. You start believing that if you can just find the mistake, you can fix the situation. But the truth is, the cycle is usually not created because of something you did. The cycle is happening because of what is happening inside them. This is how the pattern often works. When they feel emotional distance between you, they feel comfortable. The space allows them to relax. And when they feel safe again, they start missing the connection. They remember what they love about you, and they move closer. But then, once the closeness returns and the relationship starts feeling emotionally intense again, that same closeness can begin to feel threatening. So they create distance again. Then the distance makes them miss you, and the cycle repeats over and over until something changes. And the thing that usually breaks this pattern is not them suddenly waking up one day and changing everything. It is you. The moment you stop allowing yourself to be controlled by the cycle is the moment it starts losing its power over you, because the entire pattern depends on you constantly reacting, chasing the loving version of them, waiting through the cold version of them, trying to earn back the connection every time they pull away. But when you stop participating in that emotional pattern, everything becomes clearer. You finally see what is truly there. Either someone who is willing to grow and meet you emotionally, or someone who was never capable of giving you the consistency you needed. The sixth mind game is the breadcrumb that appears at exactly the right moment. You finally start feeling better. You go a few days without constantly thinking about them. You sleep peacefully again. You laugh more. You begin reconnecting with yourself. You start feeling like you are finally moving forward. And then suddenly, they appear. A message, a reaction to your story, a like on an old picture, a simple, "Hey stranger." It feels almost impossible that they reached out at that exact moment. But many times, the timing is not as random as it seems. Avoidant people can often notice when someone's energy starts changing. They may sense when you are no longer focused on them, when you are no longer waiting, when you begin emotionally stepping away. And the moment they feel that connection weakening, they may reach out, but notice the difference. They may not return with a clear plan. They may not come back ready to build something deeper. Instead, they offer just enough contact to remind you they are still there, just enough attention to reopen the emotional door, just enough to make you start wondering again. This is not always genuine emotional effort. Sometimes it is simply a way of keeping the connection alive without actually moving forward. They are not necessarily building a future with you. They may only be making sure you do not create a future without them. And that is why recognizing breadcrumbs is so important. A small sign of attention is still only a small sign of attention. It is not commitment. It is not consistency. It is not the relationship you deserve. You are not meant to survive on small pieces of affection when you are capable of experiencing something whole. The seventh mind game is the future they describe but never create. They talk about the things you will do together, the places you will visit, the experiences you will share. They create a picture of a future with you so clearly that you can almost feel it becoming real, and in those moments you believe them because they seem genuine. Then you try to turn those dreams into actual plans. You suggest a date, you talk about making it happen, you ask when it will become reality, and suddenly everything becomes unclear. The conversation changes, the excitement disappears, the future remains somewhere far away called someday. The trip never gets planned. The commitment never arrives. The dream stays a dream. This is one of the most painful patterns because it is not always intentional deception. In that moment, they may truly believe what they are saying. They may genuinely want that future. The problem is not always desire. The problem is taking action, because imagining something feels safe. Creating something real requires vulnerability. And real emotional commitment is exactly where many avoidant people struggle the most. So they offer the vision instead of the reality. They give you the possibility instead of the progress. And you find yourself waiting, hoping that one day the dream will finally become something you can step into. But love cannot survive only in the future. A relationship is built through what happens today, not just what someone says might happen someday. A quick pause before we continue. If you have stayed until this point and you have not already done it, comment, "I see you" below. Those words tell me that you are someone who wants to understand these deeper emotional patterns and conversations. I appreciate every person who takes the time to share that. Now, let's continue, because the final two patterns are the ones people often misunderstand the most. The eighth mind game is the protective distance that looks exactly like rejection. This one hurts deeply because it does not feel like a game. It feels real. They tell you they are not ready. They tell you they are not the right person for you. I can continue the rewrite from where the previous section ended. They tell you that you deserve someone better. They say they are not ready. They convince you that walking away is the right thing to do. And the strange part is their words can sound so mature, so thoughtful, even so selfless, that you almost believe they are doing you a favor. You leave thinking maybe they made the right choice. But beneath those words, there can be something much deeper happening. Sometimes they are not creating distance because they feel nothing for you. Sometimes they create distance because they feel more than they know how to handle. The connection becomes too meaningful. The possibility of losing you becomes too painful, and instead of risking that pain later, they choose to create the ending themselves while they still feel like they have control. It is not always simple rejection. Sometimes it is a form of protecting themselves from a future they are afraid they cannot survive. They would rather walk away now, while the pain feels manageable, than stay and risk experiencing a loss that feels uncontrollable later. And the heartbreaking part is that many people spend years looking back and wondering what could have happened if they had stayed. What if they had tried one more time? What if they had opened up one more conversation? What if they had allowed themselves to be vulnerable instead of running? The truth is, you were not too much. You were not the reason things became difficult. You may have been the exact kind of connection they wanted, and at the same time, the exact connection that scared them the most. The ninth mind game is the silence that reveals more than words ever could. This is the final pattern, and it is often the one people misunderstand the most. When an avoidant person still feels deeply connected to someone, their silence is not always empty. Sometimes silence carries emotion. You can sense it. Even after weeks of no communication, it can feel like there is still something unfinished between you. Almost like they are standing behind a closed door. They are not walking toward you, but they are not completely walking away either. They may quietly watch your updates without saying anything. They may revisit places that remind them of you. They may keep your contact information even after saying they were done. They may tell people they have moved on, but the way they say it reveals there is still something unresolved. Their silence becomes the safest way for them to hold feelings they do not know how to express, because speaking the truth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is the very thing they often struggle with. The feeling they may be trying to hide is simple. You still matter. You are still somewhere inside their thoughts. Time may pass. They may meet new people. They may distract themselves with other things, but some part of them may still remember the connection they had with you. However, this is where the most important part begins. Understanding all of this does not mean you should wait. It does not mean you should put your life on hold, hoping they eventually overcome their fears. It does not mean you should spend years trying to interpret their emotions or become responsible for healing wounds they refuse to face. Understanding someone does not mean carrying their struggles for them. You are not their therapist. You are not their emotional rescue plan. You are not the person who has to endlessly prove that love is safe. You are someone who deserves to be chosen openly. You deserve someone who shows up consistently, not only during moments when they are afraid of losing you. You deserve someone who does not disappear after intimacy, someone who does not create confusion just to feel secure, someone who does not offer tiny pieces of affection and expect you to survive on them. So if you are sitting there wondering whether they think about you, wondering whether your absence affects them, wondering whether they secretly miss you, the answer may be yes. They may think about you more than they admit. They may remember more than they show. But that is no longer the most important question. The real question is this: are you willing to sacrifice your peace for someone else's fear? Are you willing to keep making yourself smaller just to fit inside the limited emotional space they are willing to offer? Are you willing to spend your life waiting for someone to choose you when you have the power to choose yourself? Because someone silently missing you is not the same as someone showing up for you. Someone thinking about you is not the same as someone building a relationship with you. Someone loving you privately is not the same as someone choosing you publicly. You do not need their perfect explanation. You do not need them to finally admit everything. You do not need them to return just so you can feel that you mattered. What you need is yourself. The version of you that stops searching for hidden meanings and starts making clear decisions. The version of you that understands the difference between being desired and being valued. The version of you that can walk away peacefully, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself too. Because the truth about avoidant behavior is this: the people who return with real change return because they are ready to face themselves. And the people who never change were never going to give you what you needed. Either way, your purpose remains the same. Build a life that feels complete with or without their presence. Create a life so meaningful, so authentic, and so aligned with your own happiness that whether they come back or not, no longer controls your story. You become the center again. You always were. You just lost sight of it while trying to understand someone else. And if this message reminded you of your own strength, leave those 3 words one more time before you go. I see you. Because I do see you. I see the nights you spent questioning everything. I see the moments you searched for answers. I see the strength it takes to continue loving when someone makes you feel uncertain. But remember this, you are not behind. You are not impossible to love. You are not asking for too much. The kind of love you want exists. But it will never require you to beg someone to recognize your value. Real love does not force you to prove yourself. Real love does not keep you guessing. Real love moves toward you. Real love stays. So take what you learned from this and remember it the next time someone tries to pull you into confusion. You will recognize the pattern, you will understand the behavior, and most importantly, you will choose yourself. Because healing does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean closing your heart forever. It means finally refusing to keep hurting yourself for someone who refuses to meet you halfway. You deserve more than emotional games. You deserve someone whose heart, actions, and intentions all say the same thing. Someone who is ready to stop running. Someone who is ready to stop hiding. Someone who is ready to simply choose you.